Yeah, you know, doing this workshop for, wow, almost 9 years. Yeah, becoming better and better at unraveling people's questions here. Okay, so I think the first part of your system is we're waiting on the first bar where both of these moving averages are sloping up together or sloping down together. That creates the setup bar. So once we have the setup bar, let's see here. So yeah, so this green bar is the setup bar, it looks like. And also this green bar becomes a setup bar because it's the first bar where both of these moving averages are sloping up together. Let's see, we also had a setup bar back here. This green bar was also a setup bar, right? We had a moving average sloping up. Both moving averages were sloping up. However, we can see that this setup bar, its high was never broken. So all right, price basically backed off, never broke it. And so there is a 5-bar limit, right? So basically the high of the setup bar needs to be broken within 5 bars. So we can see, yeah, so this red bar here broke the high of the setup bar. All right, let's see. All right, that's right. And the other requirement was to have a pretty steep slope. Yeah, they have a very steep slope on these bars here. So yeah, so actually maybe this green bar here may not have been a good setup bar because of this extreme slope here. So right, this orange moving average may not be sloping up enough to meet the steep slope requirement. So definitely this green bar, we can see how steep both of these moving averages are. And this green bar back here, we can see both of these moving averages are sloping up pretty significantly, right? There's a pretty steep slope on those. So, all right. So that part is good so far. And so here's the missing piece, David. And I'm sure I've asked you this before with another question, which is what indicator are you using to track the high of the setup bar? That's what we're missing here is the indicator you're using to track the high of the setup bar. Now remember, BloodHound is not a price tracking indicator like a swing point indicator. You're not using an indicator. Yeah, well, we need something there. Yeah, we need something to track that high. Well, actually, I take that back. Yeah, it's not entirely true. There is a way to track the price of a bar, but it's pretty tedious. Yeah, since it's only tracking for 5 bars, yeah, I guess we could do that. Yeah, anything more than 5 bar, tracking the bar high or low for more than 5 bars, you know, it's doable, but it really adds a lot to the system there. This question is multi-part here, right? So we have the BloodHound signal part, and then also part of this question is creating entry signals, or I'm sorry, creating entry orders. So the entry order is going to be a buy stop entry, right? And so that will be part 2 in tomorrow's BlackBird workshop there. Now, there's a second part to this question here that applies to BloodHound. Yeah, let's see here. So this number 4 here, so referring to the entry order here, basically there's a couple of conditions that will cancel the entry order. Yeah, so it looks like, so let's kind of talk about the entry order for a little bit. Right, so we're going to place a buy stop at the close. Let's see, 1 tick above. Yeah, so David, I've got conflicting information here. On your screenshot, it says place the buy order or the stop entry at the bar close, 1 tick above the bar close. And this one says 1 tick above the high of the bar. So let's see, which is it? Is it the bar close or the bar high? The bar high on the close of the bar. Okay, right. Yeah, so David, unless otherwise stated, everything occurs on the bar close. All right, so yeah, by default, NinjaTrader operates on bar close. Yeah, so you really don't need to specify on bar close because that's NinjaTrader's default mode of operation, right? The only thing you do need to specify is if you want something to be done in real time, right? Yeah, so if something is supposed to trigger while the bar is building, that needs to be specified, you know, that something needs to occur in real time. Otherwise, it's just taken for granted that all of these conditions occur on the bar close, since that's how NinjaTrader always operates by default. So, yeah. Okay. So, let's see, on the high. Okay. So, all right. So back to the entry order here, guys. So, yeah. So back here, right? The stop entry order is going to be one tick above the signal bar, right? So one tick above this doji. And we can see the next bar, you know, it looks like the next bar here basically would have filled that entry order. Now over here, right, we're going to place our entry order one tick above the high of the signal bar. So remember that the green bar is the setup bar, the red bar is the signal bar, right? Setup bar, signal bar. So the stop entry order is one tick above here. So we can see this bar wouldn't fill it, that bar didn't fill it, that bar didn't fill it. And finally we get to the fourth bar, and that bar would have filled that entry order. So, but we can see that we have, so for that entry order, we have a 5-bar limit, or if the EMAs, you know, are no longer sloping in the same direction. Let's see here. I'm just trying to see if I can find a good example here. No, not really. I guess I'll use this one as an example. So we'll just have to imagine, you know, let's say this down bar here, right? So this is our signal bar. So this next bar, you know, if it had closed a little bit lower, right, the orange EMA might have actually sloped down, right? So if it actually sloped down, well, that would trigger this requirement to basically cancel that entry order. So canceling that entry order, we're going to need a BloodHound signal to cancel that entry order for BlackBird. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if BlackBird can monitor. Let's see. No. Yeah, BlackBird doesn't monitor the slope of any kind of indicator. So we're going to need to use BloodHound to monitor the slope of both of these moving averages to make sure that they both stay sloping in the direction of the trade, right? So both of these moving averages need to stay sloping upward, right? If one of them, well, basically it's going to be the faster one. So if the faster one starts sloping in the opposite direction, then that's going to cancel the entry order, right? That's basically going to cancel the trade there. So, yeah. All right. So we have all the pieces we need. So let's start building here. All right, I already have BloodHound on the chart here, so I just need to open it up, right? Using the button at the top of the chart here opens up BloodHound. And the first thing you want to do, right, when you're starting to build a new system or a new, you know, set of conditions, some logic here, is put a file name in there. So let's hit the change button like so. There. All right, so we have a file name here. So now all of our work will start getting saved to this file. Next, I'm going to click on the logic tab here and then hit the new button here to create a new logic template. Here. All right, so I'm going to give this logic template some kind of a name here. Well, first requirement here is just make sure that both of these moving averages are sloping together, and they have a 2-tick slope on them. So we're going to grab the indicator slope solver. Zoom in here a little bit. Let's connect this up. And the first indicator will be the EMA 10. All right, so for our input, we're going to replace the SMA with the EMA. Here's our EMA. Change it to a 10 period. And the EMA only has one plot, so it's already selected for us, so we don't have to do anything there. And next, we need that 2-tick slope requirement. So we're just going to put 2 ticks in there, like so. All right, so now we can see whenever the fast EMA here has at least a 2-tick slope to it, right? And what is a 2-tick slope? Well, a 2-tick slope means that from one dot to the next dot, right? So the cool thing with one of the cool things with NinjaTrader 8 is now when you select a plot, it puts a little dot where the data point is, right? So you can see all these dots line up with the bars. And so a 2-tick slope means that from one dot to the next dot, right, the indicator moved up a minimum of 2 ticks. So that movement is 2 ticks or more, right? So that's what generates a 2-tick slope. It's going from one dot to the next. There's a 2-tick or more difference between those dots, right? Like for example here, if you look at the distance between these dots over here, right, there's not much difference, right? That they're like less than a tick, it looks like. Yeah, from one dot to the next is basically less than a tick of movement. So, all right, so there's one slope solver. Let's do this again. Add another one, connect that in. Basically, rinse and repeat here. So the EMA 20 slope this time. So let's replace that SMA with the EMA. And we want a 20 period. Click OK. And then we need to put our 2-tick slope in there like so. All right, so now we can see whenever the EMA 20 has a 2-tick slope. And now we can grab a AND node, right? So from the logic nodes, now we can connect both of these EMAs together, and we can identify when both moving averages have a 2-tick minimum slope together, right? So we can see every once in a while, it's going to be the faster moving average here, the faster EMA. Every once in a while, it drops below that 2-tick slope, right? So that's what's happening here on these bars here where there's no racing stripe, is that EMA 10, the slope on it dropped below 2 ticks. Okay. So what we're interested in is, right, this first bar there where we get a change in direction. So let's see here. Well, actually, I don't know that. Yeah, so there's another piece there, David, is, when do we start tracking the next setup bar? Obviously we have a setup bar, and then the signal bar. This is actually going to be the signal bar. So we take the high and wait for that high to be broken, like so. There. So setup bar and signal bar. And then basically, when do we start tracking the next setup bar again? Now that's another piece that's missing there. Let's see what David says. Okay, so on a crossover. All right, yeah. So we'll wait for the next crossover before we get it set up. Okay, sounds good to me. Let's see here. All right, so we're only interested in the first signal here, right? So for example, there, that one. So that creates the setup bar. So we're waiting for that setup bar to be broken, and then we get the signal, right? So there we go. The arrow marks the signal bar there. And so then we ignore everything else until we get a crossover. All right, so that's our setup bar, and then this becomes the signal bar there, like so. Okay, so let's create a crossover solver. All right, let's give this a name here. So we're looking for the EMA 10 to cross over the EMA 20. All right, so input A is going to be our EMA 10 for this crossover solver. All right, and then input B, that'll be the EMA 20. There. All right, so basically all these crossovers here, so we can see the signals on the chart, that is basically our reset here that allows the next setup bar to occur. Right? So what we need to do, right, this is basically identifying, you know, when the two moving averages are sloping together. So let's see here. Let's name this AND node. All right, so basically this tells us when the EMAs are sloping together. So we kind of need to get rid of, right, these extra signals here, right? We need to get rid of those extra signals. So we only want to see the first signal there after the crossover or on the crossover. So to clean things up, I'm going to use the signal blocker. Let's plug that in there. And the signal blocker, what it does is it allows the first signal to get through, and then it'll block all the rest, right? But with the signal blocker, you it's not going to block indefinitely, right? So you need to tell it for how many bars do you need to block for. And so in this case, let's see, I think 50 bars ought to be enough. Let's put in 50 and let's see what happens here. So what I need to do is I need to check how long a trend might last. So for example, right, we get a long crossover here, and I can see it's still going, and it goes all the way to here. Right, that's a lot of bars. And so we can see while the faster moving average is crossed up, we get one setup bar signal, and then we also get a second setup bar signal. So we need to get rid of the second one here. All right, so basically from this long signal to this long signal, this distance here is basically 51 bars, right? So 50 bars was not enough there. So let's go in here and increase this to, let's see, 80 bars, I guess. There. So there we go. Now that second long signal is disappeared, right? So yeah, basically from this crossover to this crossover, you know, we want to make sure that the signal blocker is blocking for however many bars, you know, it could take the market to cross over in the opposite direction. Yeah, that seems to be, let's see, we're in the overnight session here. Here we go. Here's the RTH. See, it's a good thing we checked, because right from here to here, well, we can see there's no cross up, right? Those two moving averages don't cross up. They're still crossed down. And we got a secondary, setup signal in here. So even 80 bars is not enough. So let's increase this again. Let's do 125. All right. Obviously 125 cleared that up, but what we want to check for is, from when we get the first setup bar signal all the way until we get a crossover. So we actually got, the moving averages cross each other right there. So we need to make sure the signal blocker is blocking for however long the market might stay, in one of these uptrends or downtrends. So you want to definitely kind of scan through your chart and, check things. And so we have a long signal, but then we do get a cross down. So it's okay. Yeah, we had a cross down right here, and then we got another long signal after. Actually, that's a cross down and then another cross up. Yeah, so we have a bunch of crossovers occurring here between those two EMAs. Yeah, okay. So I think we're good. All right, so we have a signal blocker that's cleaning things up for us. Right, because remember previously, right, it looked like this, and now it's nice and cleaned up. So now all we see are the setup bars. All we see is the signal for the setup bar. Now, what we also need to do is reset our signal blocker. So let me show you a little trick here. So the signal blocker has a blocked output setting here, and this helps you debug the signal blocker, right? It helps you identify what the signal blocker is doing. So you can see now on the chart, right, you can see all these little tiny short signals, the little short ones, the short signals. So we get, right, we get the full signal, and then we get all these little short signals. So what these little short signals are is they're telling you that the signal blocker is blocking short signals, right? So whenever you see this partial output, right, this output that's only 0.2, that's telling you the signal blocker is blocking short signals on these bars, right? And then once we get a cross up, then it's reset. But we actually want to turn these. We want to turn the signal blocker off when, there we go, on this bar here, right? And why do we want to turn the signal blocker off? Because our moving average is crossed up, right? We have a cross up here. So remember, when the moving averages cross each other, that kind of resets the situation for another possible short signal. So when we get to this cross down again, right, we want to be able to get another setup bar. Remember, we actually have that. Remember, here's my little diamond here, identifying the setup bar. But if the signal blocker is blocking short signals, as we can see, we don't see the signal for that setup bar. So we need a way to turn off the signal blocker, right? Right now, we're waiting for 125 bars, or we're waiting for a signal in the opposite direction, right? So what we need to do is that is where this crossover solver comes in. All right, let's connect this up here. So if you remember earlier, we created a crossover solver that identifies whenever those moving averages cross each other. So when we get the cross up, this long signal is, we need this long signal to turn off the signal blocker or reset it, basically. So let's connect that into the reset there. And then we need to open up the reset section here. All right, so you can open this up. And we are using the reset signal, but we're using the opposite, reset opposite signal there. We're using an opposite signal going into the reset. So if I set this to true, now look, there we go. See, our signal blocker turned off. And so right here, it's no longer blocking short signals. And so now we actually get our next setup bar signal, right? Because our signal blocker was turned off, right? So the long signal that we had here, so the long signal coming from our crossover solver is turning the signal blocker off, right? It's going into the reset, and right, so actually, so if you remember, right, this is a short, so the signal blocker is blocking short signals, but we're using a long signal to turn off the signal blocker from blocking short signals, right? So this long signal is opposite of the short signals that are being blocked. So that is why in the reset section, that is why we used reset opposite signal, because it's a long signal is turning off the blocking of the short signals, right? So that long is opposite of the short signals that are being blocked. So that's why we use reset opposite signal. So, right, if you need to learn, more about these resets, there is a full length video on the signal blocker that you can watch. And it basically walks through each of these reset options and how they function. So, all right. So now we have our signal blocker all set up, and let's close that there. So now we can see every single setup bar. Right, so here we go. So during this entire uptrend here, where the moving averages are crossed up, right, there's no more secondary setup signals. And then once the moving averages cross down, we get a short setup signal. And then the moving averages cross up, but our moving averages aren't steep enough to generate a long setup bar. And then the moving averages cross back down, and the two EMAs are sloping down steep enough that it generates a short setup bar. And again, and then vice versa, right? The moving averages cross up and it generates a setup bar. All right, so there we go. There's our setup bars all identified. So there we go. Let's see here. So next step, let's clean up the signal blocker. Yeah, let's turn off this blocked output here. There we go. All right, so the next step, and basically kind of the last step, is identifying the actual signal bar So we need to identify when a bar breaks the low or breaks the high of the setup bar. So let's scoot that back a little bit. So what we're going to do is a bunch of comparisons. Let's zoom in here. All right, so what we're doing is we're comparing, right, the high of the setup bar to the high of the next bar, right? But this high did not move higher. So then we're going to compare it to the high of the second bar afterwards, right? And so when we finally get a high, basically it's going to be the high of the current bar, right? So obviously if this is the current bar, you know, its high didn't break the previous high. So now when the next bar occurs, we're going to test this again, and now this high did break the setup bar high, and so that will generate the signal there. So to do these, to compare the highs of these two different bars, we're going to use a comparison solver. Let's connect that into our result node. All right, so we're going to compare the high and the low, and I'm going to use a number here. So this is kind of a programming technique, right, where 0 means the current bar. So we're going to compare the high and the low of the current bar to the high and low of one bar back. So that number 1 tells you how many bars back we're going to look at. There. All right, so input, stretch this open a little bit. There we go. So input A and input B are both going to be looking at bar prices. So we're going to change the type to price. Right? Go to input B, change input B, change the type to price. There. All right, so now we need to figure out which prices are we using, right? We're not using the close of the bar, but for a long signal, right? Remember, yeah, we know we want to generate a long signal here. So we're looking at the bar high prices. So let's set these both. So for a long, it's going to be the bar high. And for a short signal, it'll be the opposite. All right, so that'll be the low. So let's set both of these here. There. Now for input B, we want that to be one bar back. So we need to change the look back period. Add 1 to it. So we're going to a look back period of 2. And what that does, right, is we're comparing the high of the current bar. So a look back period of 1 means the current bar. And we're comparing the high of the current bar to the high of 1 bar back. So with the look back period of 2. So basically, whenever the high, let's grab a little arrow here. So whenever this high is higher than the previous bar high, we're going to get a long output, right? So we have a long output here because this high is higher than that high. We get a long output here because this high is higher than that high, right? A long output here. But on this bar, right, there's no long output, right? If you look at the output, there's no long output because this high is lower than the previous bar's high, right? But this high is higher than the previous bar's high. And so we do have a long output there, right? And it's just the opposite for the lows. So we can see whenever the low is lower than the previous bar's low, right, we're getting a short output, like so. Okay, so let's see here. So what we need to do is take this condition and merge it with our setup bar signal. So let's connect all these into an AND node like so. And yeah, I need to do one thing first, because if you notice, I have a signal here already on the setup bar, right? We can't have a signal bar on the setup bar. And the reason why this happens is because we have the signal coming, the setup bar. Remember, this is the setup bar signal here. And we have our high to high, right, our high price to high price comparison. And they're both occurring on the same bar. So what I need to do is take our setup bar signal and shift it over onto the next bar, right? Because it's this next bar. This is when we want to start comparing high prices to high prices. So I need to shift these signals over. So to do that, I'm going to use a lookback node, right? And there we go. Bingo. So we can see our signal shifted, right, one bar over, right, to the right. And this lookback node, what's shifting that signal is the displacement. We can see the displacement by default is set to 1. So that's going to displace, right, the signal over to the next bar, over one bar. So let's name this here. I like to name these lookback nodes to tell me what they're doing. So basically this lookback node is just using a displacement function there, right? So a lookback period of 1 does nothing, right? So when you're dealing with a period, you always have to have at least a 1 period something. You can't have 0 periods, right? A 0 period is invalid. So periods, a period input always starts with at least 1 bar, right? You can't have 0 bars of a period, right? You can't have a 0 bar moving average. You always have to have at least a 1 bar period moving average. So, all right, so there's our look back. And so let's connect that into there and take a look at that. And I'm just going to name this here. All right, and there we go. So now, as expected, there's no signal here, right? Because we're only testing the first bar after the setup bar, right? We're only testing this bar yet. We have not built the logic to test the next bar yet. But if we look back here, and oh yeah, actually this took 2 bars as well. Let's see, let's go back a little bit. Here we go. Here's what I was looking for. So we have our setup bar, and then the next bar breaks the setup bar, and there is our signal, right? So there is our signal on the signal bar, right? So that's the trade signal right there. So, all right. So we need to go back here and basically build the logic here. Right? We need to build the logic here so that we're comparing this bar high back back to the setup bars high, right? So we're going to build basically a bunch of series of this logic here, this group of logic here, right? So this group of logic is taking the setup bar signal, right, and shifting it over on the bar to be tested, right? So if we, so if we look at this, if we look at the look back node, right, it's identifying the bar to be tested. So we're going to need another look back node. This time the displacement, it'll be set to 2, like so. Let's plug in our setup bar signals, and we can actually rename this signal blocker to setup bar, right? So that's what's coming out of our signal bar. That's what, I'm sorry. There's a lot of tongue twisters here. So what's coming out of our signal blocker is the setup bar. So our look back node, now this other one here, right? So it's now identifying the next bar to test, right? So there is that's our setup bar signal was displaced 2 bars onto the next bar to test, right? So we're testing the high to see if it broke the previous bar's high. So we're going to need another comparison solver like this. But this time, I'm going to take a little shortcut. So this time, I'm going to, right, I selected the solver tab, right? So I can see all my solvers here. And I need this comparison solver, but I need another one where I'm testing the high and low of right, the setup of the current bar with the high and low of 2 bars back, right? So now I'm comparing this high to this high. So I'm going 2 bars back, right? So this current solver is going from the current bar to only 1 bar back. But now I need one that goes from the current bar 2 bars back to get back to the signal bar. So I can make a copy of this. And what I'm going to do, adjust the name, and then adjust the look back period. I'm just going to add 1 to it. So now we're comparing, right, the high and low of the current bar to the high and low going 2 bars back, right? So there's our new solver that I just made, right? So I just kind of saved myself a little bit of time here by making a copy. And I'm going to need a couple more copies of this. Remember, we're giving the market a 5 bar opportunity here to generate a signal bar. So, you know what, probably just to eliminate confusion here, yeah, let me rename these here so that the numbers line up with the look back period. So yeah, if you're not a programmer, this numbering system can be confusing. So I'm just going to adjust all the numbers by 1. There we go. There. Let's see here. And that one. So I have 4. I need 1 more. There. All right, so there's all the comparison solvers, and you can see how the numbering is changing, right? So that numbering is changing because it'll allow us to, you know, it'll allow us to shift our our comparisons. So, right, at first we're going to compare, the bar after, back one, the next bar after, so that's 2 bars we got to look back. And then if it's still not broken, well, we need to test this next bar and look back 3 bars, and then test the next bar and look back 4 bars, and then the 5th, right, so on and so forth. So every time, a new bar is generated, we need to do that comparison in case it wasn't broken. So, all right, so that's what all these comparison solvers are going to do. So let's add them all onto the board here. So I need to go to my solver nodes, existing nodes, and inside the existing nodes, there is all those extra solvers I just made, right? So let's add them onto the board. I need another AND node. So now, when I connect this up, there, and all right, and there is our 2 signal bars, right? There's our 2 signal bars. So we need to basically finish building a couple of more, 3 more sets of this logic here. So that way we can test the other bars afterwards. So I'm just going to kind of whip through this a little quicker this time around. And I'm going to name all these AND nodes as well. So it's always a good habit to name your logic nodes to tell you, what's coming out of those logic nodes. So basically what's coming out of these logic nodes is basically the bar 1 test, and then the second bar test, and third bar test, so on and so forth. And then I also need a bunch of look back nodes. All right, we're almost done hooking this all up. There we go. Now, so we have all of these different groups of logic here, and right, so we're never going to know which one of these AND nodes is the signal going to come out of, right? So we need to join all of these AND nodes together. And to do that, we're going to use an OR node. And so when we join all of these different comparisons together, right, this is what we're going to get, right? Sometimes you might get multiple signals like this, right? And so let's zoom in here, find out why. Well, as we already know, right, this high is greater than that high, but this high is also greater than the setup bar high. And so is the next one, right? As price moves higher, all of these highs are greater than the setup bar high, right? But you do have to test all of these other bars. So to get rid of these multiple signals, all we need to do is, once again, use a signal blocker. So we can just grab a signal blocker, and zoom in here. There we go. It's connected into the input. Connect the output. Now the signal blocker, it only needs to block for a maximum of 4 bars, right? So why is that? Well, you know, if our signal occurred on the first bar after the setup bar, well, then there's only 4 additional, you know, test bars that could have a signal, right? Remember, we're only testing out, we're only going to be testing out to 5 bars. So, right, so these multiple, you know, signals here, they can only occur for a maximum of 4 bars, right? Since we're only testing out to the 5th bar. So the signal blocker only needs to block for 4 bars. And in this situation, we don't need any resets. So we can just turn all the resets off there. There, connect that back in like so. There. And that should actually do it. That should be it. There, let's call this one the signal. So that is our logic right there. And now let's go take a look and verify it. And let's see, let's do one other neat little trick here that I like to do. All right. So with 2 extra OR nodes, I'll show you, this will become apparent here in just a moment. And there. All right. So what these extra OR nodes are doing is I can now identify the setup bar and the signal bar at the same time. So you see this little partial output, that is our setup bar. So I can see when the setup bar occurs, and you can, right, and you'll notice because it's only a partial output, it's not generating a racing stripe, right? So it's not actually generating a signal. So it gives me a little visual cue of where the setup bar is, you know, if I want to look at it. And then when the actual signal occurs, right, then we're going to get the racing stripe there. And we get the full output, like so. Yeah. So this kind of helps me scan through and identify the setup bar versus the signal bar. So. Yeah, so kind of switching things here a little bit. So on this short signal here, on this next part, right, so we have one more signal that we need to build for this, right? We need to build a canceling signal to cancel the entry order. Remember, the next part of this is to place an entry order, basically 1 tick off of either the low or the high of the signal bar. So, right, this entry order is going to rest here for a maximum of 5 bars, or if the moving averages basically slope in the wrong direction. So we can see here, if you look at those moving averages, they actually start sloping up. So that cancels the entry order when that happens. Right, and let's bring up the, if we bring up the rules here, number 4 here, cancels the entry order, you know, if the EMAs are no longer, you know, sloping in the right direction, basically, right? Yeah, so since this is a short signal, those moving averages need to continue sloping down. So this will be the next part of this that we'll build as a canceling signal here. Oh, interesting. So look at this. We had a setup bar, but the high never got broken. There. Yeah, there's our setup bar, right? A really nice long up bar, but then price just pulled back, floundered around, and never broke it. So we never got the signal bar. Yep, same thing again. We have a setup bar, but no signal bar. And another one, there's a, oh, no, sorry, actually a setup bar and a signal bar, but definitely no order fill. All right. Okay, so I think we tested enough here. Yeah, same thing. We have a signal bar, but no order fill. All right, let's go back to our area where there was a cancellation. Here we go. All right, so here's our, yeah, a cancellation here. Let's see. All right, so we have the signal logic here, and so now we need to create a new logic template here for the entry cancel signal. All right, and so this condition here, this entry cancel condition, you know, the signal that we're going to build is going to be used in BlackBird, right, in tomorrow's BlackBird workshop here. So in BlackBird, you can actually use BloodHound signals to trigger various conditions. You know, you could build a BloodHound signal that tells your stop loss when to trail, right? So you can make sure that your stop loss only trails when there's a BloodHound signal, all right? Or you could use a BloodHound signal to stop the trailing from occurring as well, right? So within BlackBird, you can use BloodHound signals for various purposes. And so in this case, we're going to use it to cancel the entry order. Actually, I'll reword this. There we go. Cancel entry order signal. That's what this is going to be. So I think really the only thing we need to do, you know, if you think about this logically, is we only need to monitor the slope of the faster moving average. So let's just grab, actually, let's see. We just need a inflection solver. Yeah, we just need an inflection solver. So this would be the EMA 10 inflection solver. Yeah, pretty simple condition there. So let me mark it. So there's our entry signal, right? That is our setup bar. There we go, got those marked. Let's switch over here. And yeah, so we can actually see, let's see here. Yeah, so we actually, on the signal bar, the EMAs, the faster one, right, sloped up on the signal bar. So I guess the question is to David, since the EMA 10, right, is sloping in the wrong direction on the signal bar, should that cancel the signal? Should that actually cancel the signal, or do you still want the signal to get through and then cancel the entry afterwards? So let's see what, no. Okay, so we need to do basically, yeah, we need to filter this little cancellation signal. So, all right, let's rethink this here. We're going to rethink this. So I'm going to delete this logic template. All right, so now we only have the entry signal logic template. And so I'm going to make a copy of it now instead. There we go. Rename it. And all right, so if there is a signal, right, if there's a signal that needs to block the cancellation signal. Let's see here. So it's going to be interesting. So our cancellation signal is actually going to be a long. So for a short entry signal, the cancellation is a long, right? It's a long because, right, the EMA is sloping in the opposite direction. So it generates a long output. So I need to take the original signal. Let's see. Actually, yeah, if there's any signal. So what I'm going to do is, let's use the addition, right? So I'm taking the entry signal and modifying it so that it produces both a long and short, both a long and short. And to do that, I'm using the long short modifier, and I'm using it in additive mode, or sorry, not additive, addition. There we go. Using it in addition mode here. And now I need to invert that. All right. So this inverted signal, we can see that now there is no output, right? So the signal bar is missing an output. So that missing output will now block our cancellation signal. So to do that, use an AND node. All right, so again, here's our cancellation signal, right? This long is our cancellation, but it's on the signal bar. So if I connect in our little filter into that AND node, it's calculating. Now our cancellation signal goes away, right? It goes away. So, yeah. And so now we get our cancellation 2 bars later, right there. So now this short output, right, that can be ignored because this short output is not going to cancel our short trade. Remember, this is a short signal, so it's going to be placing a short entry order. So a short signal will not cancel the short entry order, right? This will cancel the long entry order, but obviously we don't have any long entries, anywhere around here. So we don't have to worry about these short signals because they're not going to do anything. It's this long signal that we need, that we're concerned about, because this long signal will cancel the short entry order in BlackBird, right? So we're going to tell BlackBird, if you're placing a short entry order, look for long signals to cancel it, right? And so it'll ignore the short signals and only look for long signals. Okay, so there is our logic for the entry cancellation signal. All right, so again, what we did is we took the entry signals, basically inverted them, and then combined them with the actual cancellation logic, which was really simple, right? We're just looking for if the faster moving average, reverses direction, then that's the cancellation cue, right? That's what this is trying to say right there, number 4. So, all right, now I think we're done. We're done building all the signals that we need. And so we can now take this in tomorrow's workshop into BlackBird and create the entry order for all this and stuff.